Imagine stepping onto a plane for what should be an ordinary flight, only to have your worth questioned before you even reach your seat. Picture a teenager standing tall, ticket in hand, as a pilot's mocking laughter echoes through the cabin. In that frozen moment, every eye is upon her, some in judgment, others in shock. Little do they know, this young woman's story is far from ordinary. Because the pilot who thinks her first-class ticket must be a mistake is about to discover a secret bigger than any aircraft. Get ready for a whirlwind of arrogance, defiance, and the ultimate twist of fate. Ebony Carter had lived a life, often described by outsiders as privileged, yet for her, it was simply her normal. Raised on a sprawling estate in the suburbs of Atlanta, her days were dotted with tennis lessons, advanced placement coursework, and volunteer projects with local youth mentorship programs. She'd never known financial struggle the way her parents had experienced it in their youth. Both her mother Diane and her father William had worked tireless jobs throughout high school and college to get where they were now. At 17 years old, Ebony was on the cusp of adulthood. Her curly hair was braided into neat plaits, adorned with glass beads that clicked together whenever she turned her head. She was tall for her age, with confidence in her stride. However, Ebony was neither jaded nor naive. Growing up in a majority-white private school, she had learned how to hold her own. Prejudice had come her way, before snide remarks, double takes when she answered difficult test questions correctly, or backhanded compliments about her hair. But her parents had always taught her that her identity was her power, that no one could belittle her worth unless she allowed it. Yet despite her parents' success, Ebony didn't walk around flaunting her family name. In fact, while her mother and father were currently some of the largest shareholders and effectively the de facto owners of Skyone Airways, Ebony rarely mentioned it. The airline business was her father's domain, not hers. He'd started out as a flight attendant in his college days, then slowly climbed his way up, learning everything there was to know about the airline industry before one fateful opportunity allowed him to invest in Skyone when it was little more than a regional carrier struggling to stay afloat. Over the next decade, William Carter transformed Skyone into a robust airline that flew all around North and South America, with expansions into Europe planned. Because Ebony's parents wanted her to stay grounded, they insisted she maintain a certain amount of independence. She was free to utilize the family's resources for education, but her parents never let her forget that many teenagers, especially those in marginalized communities, never had such advantages. This was why Ebony worked each summer at a youth center in downtown Atlanta, tutoring younger kids in math, English, and computer science. If Ebony's peers thought it was odd that the daughter of an airline mogul spent her summer in a community center rather than at European boarding schools or fancy camps, Ebony didn't care one bit. Her father, William Carter, often reminded her, "People may see our success and think it was handed to us. But never forget, Diane and I had to fight to get here. One day you will be in positions and places others think you don't deserve. Don't let their ignorance define you." Ebony cherished those words. They formed the bedrock of her resilience. Even with this perspective, Ebony found it difficult sometimes to juggle her personal ambitions with the realities of discrimination. She dreamed of becoming an aerospace engineer, forging new frontiers in flight design. She'd even visited the Boeing headquarters in Seattle on a school trip, a mesmerizing experience that fueled her ambition further. Standing among the massive assembly lines, Ebony felt at home, as if flight ran through her veins. Now, life was about to take another turn. Ebony was scheduled to visit her grandmother in Los Angeles for a week. While she'd normally fly with her parents or take a seat in business class on Sky One, her father insisted she experience traveling alone. He booked her a first-class ticket using her own loyalty miles accumulated from family trips to encourage her sense of independence. Ebony was excited. It would be her first time flying solo across the country, a milestone that felt like a rite of passage. She would depart from Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, the busiest airport in the world. Ebony had always loved the hustle of Hartsfield-Jackson, the moving sidewalks, the kaleidoscope of travelers from every corner of the globe, and the unstoppable energy that crackled in the air. So on a bright Monday morning, Ebony rose at dawn. She put on her favorite traveling outfit, a comfortable yet stylish jumpsuit in emerald green. She double-checked that she had her phone charger, an extra set of headphones, and most importantly, her boarding pass. She was flying first class on her family's airline to Los Angeles. Her parents had an early business meeting, so their driver would drop Ebony at the airport and then continue on to take them to their commitments. It was a small departure from their usual family travel routine, but Ebony cherished the independence. As the car slid through Atlanta's morning traffic, Ebony listened to her father's final reminders. Don't forget to keep your phone on airplane mode once you're on board. Be polite and respectful to the flight attendants. And Ebony, if you run into any trouble, call us. But I want you to handle things on your own first. Okay, Ebony nodded confidently. Dad, I'll be fine. Really, I'm excited about this. Her mother Diane gave her a quick hug. We know you will be. See you in a week, sweetheart. That was that. Ebony was on her own, stepping into the swirl of travelers at Hartsfield-Jackson, eager and a little nervous, but mostly excited. Little did she know that within hours she'd face a confrontation that would test every ounce of that self-assuredness and unleash a chain of events that would shake the very foundation of her identity, her family, and even the airline itself. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport buzzed like a beehive. Screens flashed departure and arrival times. Families laden with luggage hurried towards security checkpoints. Business travelers wheeled their compact carry-ons with grim efficiency. Ebony blended into the chaos with ease, weaving past slow-moving crowds and frantic latecomers rushing to their gates. The scale of the airport always amazed her. The tram that connected terminals, the innumerable shops, and the whiff of coffee and fast food at every corner. She navigated toward Terminal S, where Sky One Airways typically operated. Ebony spotted the sleek, modern check-in counters with the airline's teal and silver logo shining overhead. It was a design her father had introduced, symbolizing innovation and the open sky. A wave of pride washed over her. Although she never flaunted it, Ebony felt a certain satisfaction that her father's vision was appreciated by countless travelers every day. Approaching the first-class check-in, Ebony handed her boarding pass and ID to the friendly agent behind the counter. The agent, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, verified her details. Hi, Miss Carter. Flying first class to Los Angeles today. That's me, Ebony said with a polite grin. The check-in agent's smile grew upon noticing Ebony's last name. Ebony wondered if she recognized it or was simply offering standard courtesy. Either way, Ebony was used to this gentle inquiry. The agent typed a bit on her computer. Everything looks good, she said, tagging Ebony's suitcase for priority handling. Enjoy your flight. And thanks for flying with us. Ebony laughed lightly. Of course, it's my favorite airline. She moved away from the counter, a little flutter of excitement in her stomach. This was her first time embarking on such a long journey without her parents. She glanced at her phone. She had time to breeze through security and maybe grab a snack before boarding. Security proceeded smoothly, though Ebony got the usual stares. A teenage girl, traveling alone and heading for the priority line. She'd grown accustomed to the double takes, though she rarely admitted how much it irked her. Today, Ebony shrugged it off. She was determined that nothing would dampen her spirits. Once through security, Ebony headed to the Sky One Lounge, an airy space with plush seating, free Wi-Fi, and a full breakfast bar. She grabbed a croissant, fruit salad, and fresh orange juice. Settling into a comfortable armchair, she checked her flight details on the screen. Sky One Flight 319, departing at 9:20 a.m. She had about 40 minutes before boarding. Perfect. She took a moment to reflect on her parents' stories. Her father once shared how during his early days he had faced microaggressions daily. Flight attendants openly doubted his capability to handle emergency procedures because of the color of his skin. Pilots refused to shake his hand in the cockpit. He'd persevered always with a dignified smile. Ebony, he had told her, they may hate you for who you are, but your success will always speak louder. Ebony nodded, inwardly determined to carry on that legacy. After finishing her breakfast, Ebony thanked the lounge attendant and made her way to gate S17, where her flight would board. The gate area was already filling up with passengers. Businessmen chatted loudly on cell phones, while a young couple tried to calm a fussy toddler. Ebony took a seat near the front and fished out her earbuds from her bag. Listening to music was her favorite method for passing the time. It wasn't long before a Sky One representative announced, "We'll begin pre-boarding in just a few minutes. First Class Group 1 and passengers needing additional assistance may line up when called." Ebony stood and checked her boarding pass. Indeed, seat 2A, a plush window seat in the first-class cabin. She joined the short line of first-class passengers. Amid the small queue, Ebony noticed a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing a pilot's uniform. At first, she assumed he was just passing by, or possibly catching a deadhead flight. But then she realized he was the captain of her flight. The 4 stripes on his epaulets signified his rank. He seemed to be in his 40s, with a stern face and a posture that exuded confidence, perhaps even a touch of arrogance. The pilot appeared to glance at the line forming for first class, and his gaze fell on Ebony. There was a flicker of confusion on his face, something Ebony had witnessed before. She braced herself. However, the pilot quickly looked away, focusing on a conversation with a flight attendant. Ebony didn't think much of it. After all, she had every right to be in that line. When boarding began, Ebony moved to the front, scanning her pass at the gate. The gate agent said, "Have a wonderful flight, Miss Carter," then offered a polite nod. Ebony returned the smile, stepping into the jet bridge that led down to the aircraft. She inhaled the slightly stale but familiar smell of airplane corridors, letting the significance of this solo journey wash over her. She was excited to read her new novel, watch a movie, and just relax as the plane soared over the country. Walking into the first-class cabin, Ebony was greeted by an attendant who offered to show her to her seat. "Welcome aboard, Miss Carter," the attendant said with a gracious smile. Ebony thanked her, stowed her carry-on overhead, and settled into seat 2A. The seat was spacious, with ample legroom, and came with a plush pillow and soft blanket. Ebony was just about to pop in her earbuds when she heard a faint chuckle from somewhere near the cockpit. She glanced up. The pilot stood at the front of the cabin, arms folded, chatting with another flight attendant. His gaze flickered in Ebony's direction, and there it was again, a suppressed smirk, almost like a scoff. Ebony told herself she might be imagining it, People sometimes looked at her oddly in first class. She'd grown used to it. She decided to let it go. Outside, the ground crew loaded luggage. Overhead, the bins shut with soft clicks as the cabin filled with more first-class passengers, including a middle-aged man in a crisp suit who took seat 2B. Ebony turned on her phone's airplane mode, readying her playlist. She was determined to enjoy this flight. But unbeknownst to her, that harmless smirk from the pilot was just the first sign of a looming confrontation, one that would unfold at 35,000 feet and change her life forever. At exactly 9:10 a.m., flight attendants closed the aircraft door with a decisive thud. Moments later, the pilot came over the intercom greeting everyone. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Ryan Davis speaking. On behalf of Sky-One Airways, I'd like to welcome you aboard Flight 309 to Los Angeles. Our flight time today is approximately 4 hours and 30 minutes. We should have a smooth ride, and we appreciate your choosing Sky-One." Ebony raised her eyebrows when she heard the name, Ryan Davis. She remembered some dinner conversations where her father mentioned a few of the airline's longtime pilots. The name Ryan Davis might have come up, though she couldn't recall the context. Something about management not being too fond of him, or him having a short fuse. Ebony couldn't be sure. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Ebony felt a ripple of excitement. She loved the rhythmic engine hum as the aircraft prepared for takeoff. The flight attendants performed the safety demonstration. The man in seat 2B offered Ebony a friendly nod. She flashed a polite smile in return, then turned her attention to the window, watching the airport terminals shrink as the aircraft taxied onto the runway. Soon the engines roared to life. Ebony adored that moment of acceleration, the sense of speed, launching the plane into the sky. The runway fell away beneath them. Atlanta turned into a grid of roads and buildings, growing tinier by the second. Clouds enveloped the plane as it climbed steadily. Despite her frequent travels, Ebony never grew tired of the spectacle of takeoff. Once at cruising altitude, the seatbelt signs dimmed. Flight attendants bustled about preparing beverages and hot towels for the first-class cabin. Ebony politely declined the alcohol offers, asking for a ginger ale instead. She leaned back, put on a pair of noise-canceling headphones, and started scrolling through movie options on the seat screen. 10 minutes later, while Ebony was selecting an action film, she felt someone looming in the aisle beside her. She glanced up. Captain Davis stood there, arms behind his back, scanning the first-class cabin. His gaze landed on Ebony, and a subtle, mocking smile curled on his lips. "Everything okay, young lady?" he asked, his tone dripping with a condescending edge that Ebony immediately picked up on. Lost, perhaps, Ebony's eyes narrowed. She'd been addressed as young lady before, but never with such a sneer. "No, I'm fine," Ebony replied, keeping her composure. The pilot glanced at Ebony's seat number placard, then her face, as though verifying the mismatch he suspected. First time in first class, Ebony felt her heart pound with a rush of annoyance. She knew exactly what was happening. He was questioning her presence. She tried to keep her voice steady. "I've flown first class a few times." He nodded slowly, feigning concern. "Just wanted to make sure you knew where you were seated. This is seat 2A. Right now." Ebony felt her cheeks warming. He was implying she had the wrong seat, or perhaps she'd snuck in. She remembered her father's advice about staying calm under pressure. "Yes, Captain. I'm exactly where I should be," Ebony answered. "Everything is good." A passing flight attendant paused, sensing the tension. She asked, "Can I help you, Captain Davis?" He raised a palm, signaling her to leave. No, just checking on our valued first-class passengers," he said, but his tone made it clear Ebony wasn't included in that valuation. He leaned in, dropping his voice to a near whisper. "We don't want any issues up here, do we?" Ebony stared at him in disbelief. Her mind reeled with questions. Was he implying that she would cause an issue simply by existing in first class? She took a calming breath. "No issues," she responded carefully, enunciating. She was too stunned to say more. Captain Davis straightened, shot her a tight-lipped smirk, and strode back toward the cockpit, leaving Ebony feeling a swirl of anger and humiliation. The man in seat 2B glanced over. Ebony met his sympathetic gaze, but neither of them spoke. She forced herself to remain calm. She'd faced prejudice in small increments before, but never so brazenly, and never from someone with such authority over her flight. She remembered her father's second piece of advice: document everything. Ebony discreetly grabbed her phone and typed a few notes about the pilot's behavior. She wasn't sure if it would escalate, but she wanted a record just in case. Part of her wanted to call her dad right away, but he had asked her to handle things herself first. Plus, the flight had only just begun. She decided to wait and see if the captain's open hostility would continue. The flight attendant came by to ask Ebony if she needed anything. Ebony forced a small smile and said she was fine. She tried to re-immerse herself in the movie. As the action scene exploded on the screen, Ebony's mind wandered. She was used to the occasional side-eye in first class. Typically, if she politely smiled or said something, the tension dissipated. But the pilot's brazen confrontation rattled her. He was someone with power, someone who literally controlled the aircraft. Ebony's stomach knotted. She prayed the rest of the flight would be uneventful. Yet Ebony suspected things wouldn't remain quiet for long. Captain Davis seemed determined to make her feel unwelcome. She resolved that if he approached her again with the same condescension, she would stand her ground. After all, Ebony Carter had every right to sit in seat 2A, and more right than he could ever imagine if he only knew the truth about her lineage. The first hour of the flight passed in relative peace. Ebony tried to immerse herself in her film, but her mind kept drifting back to the pilot's sneering face. She mentally replayed the conversation, second-guessing her responses. Could she have been firmer, more assertive, or was it best that she remained calm? She reminded herself that the flight was only halfway to Los Angeles. She couldn't let stress consume her. That would be letting him win. Service in first class moved to the main meal, and Ebony was offered a choice of grilled salmon or a pasta dish. She selected salmon and nibbled at it, sipping her ginger ale quietly. Across the aisle seat, 2B's occupant, a well-dressed man named Richard, politely introduced himself. "Excuse me," he said quietly, leaning over. "I couldn't help but notice the pilot's odd behavior earlier. Are you all right?" Ebony appreciated the concern. "I'm fine," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Thanks for asking." Richard frowned. "That was unusual. I've flown first class many times, and I've never seen a captain speak to a passenger like that." Ebony shrugged, forcing a small smile. Maybe he's just having a bad day. She didn't want to explain the deeper layers she suspected: racism, bias, prejudice. She hardly knew Richard, and although he seemed friendly, Ebony wanted to keep the conversation brief. Richard nodded, returning to his meal, but Ebony could tell he remained concerned on her behalf. Soon, Ebony's eyes drifted to the window. The plane soared over a blanket of white clouds, the midday sun turning the horizon a soft yellow. She found solace in that view, reminding herself that life was larger than a single, unpleasant encounter. She tried to appreciate the calm, but her reprieve was short-lived. The captain's voice crackled over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting some moderate turbulence ahead. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, please discontinue service and be seated." The cabin hushed as the flight attendants quickly secured the meal carts. Ebony finished the last bite of her salmon and ensured her belt was snug. Turbulence wasn't new to her. She even found it somewhat thrilling. However, the seatbelt sign remained illuminated longer than usual. The plane began to shudder, tilting and bumping, as it passed through a patch of rough air. Ebony heard gasps from the main cabin behind her. Suddenly, an announcement from the cockpit: "Apologies for the bumps, folks. We've encountered more turbulence than anticipated, but we'll do our best to navigate around it." Ebony noticed the overhead bins rattling. She felt a jolt when the plane dropped a few feet, her stomach lurching. She closed her eyes, inhaling slowly. She trusted that the plane was designed to handle such turbulence, but the unpredictability still set her nerves on edge. In the midst of the turbulence, Ebony heard a frantic sound. Someone in the cabin behind her was crying softly, perhaps a nervous flyer. The flight attendants stayed strapped in, but Ebony felt a pang of empathy. She remembered from her father's stories how crucial it was to stay calm in these situations. After 10 minutes of rocking, the plane finally leveled out. Captain Davis came back on the intercom, his tone strangely smug. "All right, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we've skirted the worst of it. We should be returning to smoother skies shortly. Once again, I appreciate your cooperation." There was a pause, and then his voice dropped slightly. "And I hope everyone in first class is exactly where they need to be." Click. The intercom went silent. Ebony felt a hot flush spread across her cheeks. She knew that comment was aimed at her. Though subtle, the pilot's jab was undeniable, as if he couldn't resist an underhanded remark, even in a general cabin announcement. She exchanged a glance with Richard in 2B, who looked appalled. He mouthed silently, "Is he serious?" Ebony shrugged, forcing a stoic expression. As the plane stabilized, Ebony's phone buzzed in her pocket. She'd put it on airplane mode, but Wi-Fi was available on the aircraft. She checked her messages, one from her best friend, Kendra, who was asking if Ebony had taken off yet. Another from her mother: "Hope your flight is going well. Love you." Ebony typed back a quick reassurance that she was fine, though she left out the pilot fiasco for the time being. She was determined to handle it alone, at least until she landed. The flight attendants resumed their duties after the turbulence. One of them, who wore a name tag reading Michelle, approached Ebony. "Miss Carter, I'm so sorry about Captain Davis's manner earlier. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to make your flight more comfortable." Ebony appreciated the gesture. "Thank you, Michelle. I'll let you know if anything else comes up." With a solemn nod, Michelle moved on to check on other passengers. Ebony's heart sank slightly. Even the cabin crew seemed aware that the pilot was stepping out of line. The question was why. Was it simply because Ebony was young female and black and in first class, or did Davis harbor a specific grudge against the Carter, name Ebony's mind, word with possibilities? Perhaps he recognized her last name and had it out for the Carter family for some reason. Maybe her father had been responsible for some policy that Captain Davis disagreed with. But Ebony had zero evidence, only speculation. All she knew was that Captain Davis's hostility was real, and it wasn't diminishing. For the next hour, Ebony tried to distract herself with a movie. She forced laughter at the comedic parts, though her mind remained unsettled. She noticed how Richard occasionally glanced her way, as if to say, "If he does anything else, I'll speak up." It was some small comfort. Ebony typed more notes in her phone: times, details, exact phrases, a habit she'd learned from her father, who always said documentation was the best defense against gaslighting and revision of events. Eventually, Ebony's eyelids grew heavy from the stress. She reclined her seat a bit and drifted off, letting the hum of the engines lull her into a light sleep. It was a restless slumber, but at least her mind got a brief respite from the turmoil swirling around. She had no way of knowing that while she dozed, the pilot was on the phone in the cockpit, grumbling to someone about a teenage troublemaker in first class, using vile language that not even the co-pilot dared to challenge. The seeds of a confrontation had been planted, and Ebony would soon face a confrontation at 35,000 feet that no passenger should ever have to endure. Ebony woke to the faint click of the seatbelt sign. Another patch of turbulence. She glanced around. The cabin was quiet. Several first-class passengers were sleeping, their seats reclined. A flight attendant discreetly handed out water bottles. Ebony sat up, pushing her blanket aside. Then the captain's voice blared overhead, startling her fully awake. "This is Captain Davis again," he began, sounding irritated. "We're encountering some unexpected headwinds which will slightly delay our arrival. Nothing serious, but we'll keep you informed." The flight attendant, standing near Ebony, caught her eye. The tension in the air was palpable, as if everyone sensed the captain's tone was off. Ebony tried to settle back, scanning the overhead monitors for the updated arrival time. Another 90 minutes at least. She exhaled, hoping the pilot would remain behind the closed cockpit door for the rest of the flight. But the squeak of the cockpit door opening shattered that hope. Captain Davis emerged, walking briskly into the first-class cabin. Ebony braced herself. This time, there was no casual approach, no veneer of politeness. Davis strode directly to Ebony's seat, ignoring the stares of shocked passengers. He spoke loudly, loud enough for everyone in first class to hear. "Miss, let me see your ticket." Ebony's mouth went dry. She felt the heat of every gaze upon her. She turned off her movie and mustered as much dignity as possible. "Is there a problem, Captain?" he almost snarled. "I asked to see your ticket now." Ebony lifted her boarding pass from the seat pocket where she'd stored it. She handed it to him, trying to keep her hands from trembling. She could sense the hush that fell over the cabin. This was no ordinary seat check. It was a spectacle. Captain Davis studied the boarding pass, his eyes scanning the name, seat number, and loyalty miles status. Then he snorted in contempt. "Well, well. Ebony Carter," he read aloud, practically spitting the syllables. "Traveling on miles, I see. First class." The disgust in his voice was unmistakable. Ebony felt her heart hammering in her chest, but she refused to look away. She lifted her chin. "That's correct." The pilot flicked his gaze at her. "Don't you think it's a bit unusual for someone like you to be in this section?" A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Richard in 2B started to rise from his seat, but Ebony placed a hand on his arm, signaling him to wait. She wanted to handle this. "I'm not sure what you mean by someone like me," Captain Ebony said, her voice controlled but firm. "Is there a policy against minors sitting in first class?" Davis smirked, ignoring her question. "I've dealt with stowaways before, people forging tickets, especially brats who think they can slip in here without paying the premium price." Ebony's cheeks burned. "My ticket is legitimate. You can see it's been issued by Sky One, all proper channels. There's no mistake." An uneasy murmur spread among the other passengers. Some looked horrified. Others simply stared, unsure of how to intervene. Ebony sensed that this was the moment her father had warned her about, the moment she would have to stand her ground and do so with grace. In a low tone, Ebony said, "Captain Davis, with all due respect, if you have any doubts, you should speak with the gate agent or check the airline's booking system. I have the right to sit here." He let out a derisive laugh. "Rights? I've been with Sky One for over 15 years. I know who belongs in first class and who doesn't." Just then, flight attendant Michelle rushed forward. "Captain, please," she pleaded in a hushed tone. "We have protocols. If you question a passenger's legitimacy, we can quietly verify with ground staff. There's no need for this scene." Davis spun on her fury, flashing in his eyes. "Stay out of this, Michelle. I'm handling it." At that moment, Ebony realized she had two choices: remain silent or escalate. She thought of her father's face, her mother's perseverance, the legacy they had built. She refused to let this pilot's arrogance strip away her dignity. Ebony stood up, stepping into the aisle, meeting Davis's glare. "You're right," she said, voice trembling slightly. "You have been with Sky One for over 15 years, and I respect your service. But you should know, Captain, that I have every right to be here. I'm Ebony Carter, William Carter's daughter." And she paused deliberately, letting the words hang. "And William Carter happens to be the principal owner of this airline." The cabin erupted into stunned silence. The flight attendant, Michelle's eyes widened. Richard's jaw dropped. Captain Davis blinked, a momentary confusion flickering across his features before he barked out a mirthless laugh. "Owner, eh? That's some story. Next, you'll tell me your father is the CEO of Boeing as well." Ebony felt a surge of adrenaline. "I'm not joking. My father is William Carter, and he effectively owns Sky One. If you don't believe me, I suggest you check. Call up your superiors, or better yet, look at the pictures hanging in the headquarters building. You'll see him there with the CFO and other board members." Captain Davis tightened his jaw eyes, darting to Michelle, who nodded slowly, confirming Ebony's words. The pilot's face twitched with anger and disbelief. "You think you can fool me? I'm not fooling anyone," Ebony stated firmly. "I suggest you calm down and verify the truth before continuing this harassment." A hush draped over the cabin. Finally, with a dismissive grunt, Davis thrust the boarding pass back into Ebony's hand. "We'll see," he muttered, turning on his heel and marching toward the cockpit. The eyes of every passenger followed him. Michelle and another flight attendant hovered by Ebony's seat, worry etched into their expressions. Ebony sank back down, heart pounding. She could hardly believe the confrontation had reached this point: public humiliation, accusations of fraud, and blatant bigotry. Though Ebony had asserted her parentage, she was shaken. She felt tears threaten to well up, but refused to cry in front of everyone. She steadied her breathing, reminding herself that she'd done nothing wrong. Quietly, Michelle knelt beside Ebony's seat. "I am so sorry. Do you want me to call anyone on the ground? Or maybe speak with the co-pilot?" Ebony shook her head. "Let him verify it himself. I'm done trying to convince him." Richard leaned over. "I'm going to report this. This is unacceptable." Ebony offered a weak, grateful smile. "Thank you." The rest of the first-class cabin seemed divided between shock and outrage, but Ebony was past caring what bystanders thought. Her main concern was the pilot's behavior. She glanced at her phone again, considering whether to call her father mid-flight. But the plane was at cruising altitude and calls were restricted. She could only use Wi-Fi-based messaging apps. Perhaps she should text her parents about what was happening. After a moment's hesitation, Ebony decided to wait. She knew her father was likely in a meeting. Besides, this was her battle now. If Captain Davis didn't calm down, Ebony would escalate the matter once they landed. Her father would be furious, but Ebony hoped to handle it as much as she could on her own. She swallowed the lump in her throat, stared out the window at the endless sky, and prayed for the next hour of flight to pass quickly. But Ebony had no idea that the pilot's meltdown was far from over, and that the final showdown was yet to come. With the cabin still buzzing from the confrontation, Ebony closed her eyes, leaning her head against the seat's headrest. She breathed slowly in and out, trying to quell the adrenaline surging through her. Her thoughts drifted to memories of her father, William Carter, and how he had forged his path in an industry that hadn't always welcomed him with open arms. Flashback 1. Ebony was 12 years old, standing with her father on the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson during a special event for up-and-coming entrepreneurs. William had been invited as a guest speaker to talk about his journey from flight attendant to majority shareholder of Sky One. She remembered the hush that fell over the crowd when he took the microphone. He spoke about the challenges he'd faced, racist comments from co-workers, managers who doubted his abilities, and banks that refused him loans. Yet none of that stopped him from working double shifts to save money, from investing every spare dollar into the airline's stocks, and from mastering every corner of the business. "Don't be discouraged by those who underestimate you," he had said, looking squarely at Ebony. "Learn every aspect of your craft, and no one can ever claim you don't belong." Flashback 2. Ebony was 14, tagging along on a trip to Seattle, where her father had meetings with Boeing executives. They toured the Boeing assembly line, witnessing massive aircrafts in various stages of construction. Ebony was awestruck, but she also noticed how some staff eyed her father curiously, as if wondering how a black man had ascended to such a powerful position. Her father had squeezed her shoulder and whispered, "Let them wonder, Ebony. Let our success speak." These memories bolstered Ebony's resolve. She wouldn't let Captain Davis's bigotry define her experience. She wasn't a helpless child. She had the grit of her parents and the entire Carter legacy behind her. When she opened her eyes, Michelle stood there offering Ebony another glass of ginger ale. Ebony accepted it, nodding in thanks. Softly, Michelle asked, "Do you need anything else, Miss Carter?" Ebony gave a small, tight smile. "No, thank you. I'm okay." Michelle hesitated, then said, "If you'd like, I can have a quiet word with the co-pilot. We've all served under Captain Davis, and, well, this isn't the first time he's crossed a line." Ebony felt a flash of dismay. So Davis had a history of behavior issues. She worried for other passengers who might have faced his prejudice in the past. However, Ebony wanted to avoid further escalation mid-flight. If the pilot was truly unhinged, she didn't want to provoke him into anything reckless. "Thank you, Michelle. But let's just get to LA in one piece." Michelle nodded. "Understood. We're all here for you." As she sipped her ginger ale, Ebony felt some measure of calm returning. She decided to send her father a text via the in-flight Wi-Fi, something brief just to prepare him in case the situation exploded upon landing. She typed Dad's slight issue with pilot. "He's confrontational. I told him who I am. Might need your help when we land. We'll explain more then." She hit send, watching the little circles spin as the message went out. Within moments, she saw the ellipsis indicating her father was typing. His reply came, "Are you safe? Do I need to contact the airline immediately?" Ebony responded, "I'm safe. I think it's just racism, but he's making a big scene. Let me handle it. We'll call you when I land." Her father replied with a simple, "All right, but keep me posted. Love you." Ebony rested her phone on her lap, feeling a bit more secure. At least her father was informed. She closed her eyes again, forcing herself to breathe deeply. Another 30 minutes or so, and they'd begin descending. She just had to endure this flight a bit longer. Flashback 3. Ebony recalled another pivotal moment, her father's triumphant unveiling of Sky One's new branding. She'd stood in the front row as he took the stage, unveiling the airline's sleek teal and silver livery, capturing the attention of major travel publications. Reporters had asked him about his journey, about the significance of diversity in leadership. He'd answered, voice steady with pride, "Diversity isn't just a buzzword, it's essential. We fly all kinds of people around the world. Our leadership should reflect that." She clung to these memories like a life raft. They reminded her that she belonged in any seat she chose, economy, business, or first class. No one had the right to laugh her off or question her worth. If Captain Davis was determined to play power games, Ebony would remain rooted in her identity. She opened her eyes again, gazing around the first-class cabin. Some passengers had returned to their books or screens, but Ebony sensed their furtive glances. They'd witnessed the confrontation. They knew Ebony was no ordinary teen passenger. She felt a blend of embarrassment and pride swirling within her. This was not how she wanted attention drawn to her, but if it brought to light the kind of treatment black passengers could face, particularly black women, and especially young ones, perhaps some good might come of it. In these final moments before descent, Ebony steeled herself. Part of her feared that Captain Davis would do something outrageous, like ordering her off the plane in an emergency landing. But she pushed that fear aside. Sky One had procedures, and a pilot's power wasn't limitless. Besides, Ebony suspected that Davis was now checking with headquarters, discovering that Ebony's claim was valid. If he had any sense, he'd keep quiet for the remainder of the flight. Still, Ebony braced for one last clash. She could feel it in the tense air around her. Davis was a man who believed he was above accountability. He'd singled her out before, and she doubted he'd let it rest so easily. Ebony could only hope that her father's name and her own unwavering composure would keep them safe until Los Angeles. Sure enough, mere minutes before the plane began its descent, Captain Davis once again exited the cockpit. This time, however, he didn't just focus on Ebony. He stood at the front of the first-class cabin, microphone in hand, addressing all the passengers as if making an in-flight announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice strained, "I've been informed by our corporate officers that there is indeed a passenger on board who claims to be associated with Sky One's ownership." He paused, scanning the rows of wide-eyed travelers. "I would like to clarify some things. While we respect all passengers, we also have rules about behavior and seat assignments." Ebony felt her anger rising at the implication that she had broken any rules. Richard in 2B looked at her incredulously. A few passengers pulled out their phones, clearly recording the pilot's bizarre speech. Davis's voice took on a defiant edge. "I have not been provided with any official confirmation of this passenger's claims, but I will of course act according to policy. Should this passenger truly have such connections, I invite them to come forward and prove it beyond just words and a last name." Ebony inhaled sharply. This was beyond unprofessional. It was humiliating and borderline humiliating for the airline too. The flight attendants appeared horrified, exchanging panicked glances. Ebony felt a surge of righteous indignation. Enough was enough. She stood up, stepping into the aisle with quiet resolve. "You want confirmation?" Ebony's voice was steady, but it projected with surprising clarity in the hush of the cabin. "Fine. My father is William Carter, the largest shareholder of Sky One Airways. You can contact your superiors at corporate, who have likely already confirmed this. I'm Ebony Carter, Captain Davis, and if this is still unclear, I'm more than happy to provide my father's direct line once we land." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Some passengers cheered softly, likely tired of Davis's tirade. But the pilot's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching at his sides. "That won't be necessary, Miss Carter," he said, his tone mocking. "If corporate is already aware, then we'll handle it once we're on the ground. Until then, I suggest you return to your seat and not disrupt my cabin." Ebony's eyebrows shot up. Your cabin? She took a trembling breath, keeping her temper in check. You may be the captain of this flight, but you do not own Sky One. And you certainly have no right to single me out based on your misconceptions. The tension in the air was thick, crackling like static. Captain Davis glared at Ebony, but before he could speak again, a clear, authoritative voice cut through the silence. Captain Davis, that's enough. Everyone turned. The co-pilot, a woman in her early 30s, had stepped out of the cockpit. Her face was set in a stern expression. She placed a firm hand on the captain's shoulder. We are beginning our descent. I need you in the cockpit. Davis hesitated, then shrugged off the co-pilot's hand. I'm finishing. That's an order, the co-pilot snapped, her eyes flashing. Ebony could almost feel the power dynamic shift. The co-pilot outranked Davis in that moment, since she was acting with the authority of the airline's flight operation rules. Davis glared at her, then at Ebony, but he stomped back to the cockpit without another word. A collective sigh of relief swept the cabin. The co-pilot turned to Ebony with an apologetic look. Miss Carter, I'm very sorry for all of this. We'll make sure to file a report. Please take your seat. We'll be on the ground soon. Ebony nodded her composure, giving way to exhaustion. She sank into her seat, emotions swirling, anger, relief, disbelief. The flight attendants hurried to prepare the cabin for landing. Richard leaned over, whispering, Are you okay? Ebony swallowed hard. I think so. Thanks. The next 20 minutes passed in a haze. Ebony fastened her belt, gazing out the window, as Los Angeles sprawled below, glimmering in the early afternoon sun. She mentally rehearsed her next steps once they landed. She'd contact her father. She'd speak with the gate agents. She might even contact the news if necessary. Captain Davis had publicly harassed her. Finally, the plane touched down with a jolt. As they taxied to the gate, Ebony's heart pounded. She wasn't sure what scene awaited her upon deplaning. She half expected security or airline officials to meet them at the door. The seatbelt sign dinged off and Ebony stood, collecting her things. She heard the murmurs of fellow passengers, some offering supportive smiles, others still in shock. When the door opened, Ebony braced herself. Sure enough, 2 airline officials in suits waited in the jet bridge, looking concerned and scanning the faces of disembarking passengers. Richard in 2B patted Ebony on the shoulder. Good luck, he said quietly, stepping off the plane. Ebony approached the officials. One, a tall woman with a Skyn badge that read Operations Manager, quickly introduced herself. Miss Carter, I'm so sorry you had to experience that. Could you please come with us? We'd like to speak to you privately. Ebony nodded. Sure, I have a few things to say as well. Just then, Captain Davis appeared behind her, rolling his flight bag. His expression was a cocktail of anger and apprehension. The operations manager turned to him. Captain Davis, you're to report to the regional manager's office immediately. We'll debrief after we speak with Miss Carter. Davis's face twisted, but he said nothing. He stomped down the jet bridge, vanishing into the terminal. Ebony felt a tremor of triumph and a pang of lingering fear. The final showdown had come and gone, but repercussions still hung in the air like a storm cloud. The operations manager guided Ebony to a nearby lounge area where they could speak away from the public eye. Ebony prepared to lay out every detail, every insult, every bit of bigotry the pilot had spewed, and she intended to make it crystal clear no one, not even a veteran captain, was above accountability. Inside the private lounge, Ebony sat at a polished table across from the operations manager and another Sky One executive. They offered her water, which she accepted throat dry from the stressful flight. The manager, Linda Coleman, began, Miss Carter, On behalf of Sky One, I sincerely apologize. Captain Davis's behavior is unacceptable and doesn't reflect our values. Ebony nodded. Thank you. I'd like to file a formal complaint. Linda slid over an incident form. Of course, we'd also like to take a verbal statement, if that's okay. Ebony recounted everything: Davis's sneers, the intercom remarks, and the public confrontation. She relied on her phone notes to deliver a calm, detailed account. Linda typed as she spoke. Another executive, Carlos, listened intently. When she finished, Linda said, "This will be forwarded to headquarters and the board, including William Carter," Ebony asked. Linda nodded. "Absolutely. We're aware he's Sky One's largest shareholder. Captain Davis's actions warrant immediate review." Carlos added, "We've already received statements from flight crew and multiple passengers. Disciplinary action is likely possibly suspension or termination." Ebony exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. "Thank you. I don't want special treatment, but if he's treated others this way, it needs to stop." Linda and Carlos exchanged a glance. "There are prior complaints," she said. "This is the most serious, but not the first." Ebony's shoulders relaxed. At least this wasn't being brushed aside. "I need to call my father. He should hear it from me." "Of course," Linda said. Ebony stepped into the hallway, calling her dad. His voice picked up instantly. "Ebony, are you okay?" "I'm safe, Dad. Landed fine." But the pilot was hostile. It turned into a whole scene. "I've filed a complaint." "I've already spoken with corporate," William said. "They're taking this seriously. I'm flying out for tomorrow's board meeting." Ebony's voice trembled. I didn't expect it to go that far. You handled it well. I'm proud of you." These moments hurt, but they spotlight what still needs changing. "Love you," she said. "Love you too." Back in the lounge, Linda asked, "All set?" "Yes," Ebony replied. "My father will be in touch." "We're here if you need anything else," Linda assured her. "Would you like someone to escort you to baggage claim?" Ebony nodded, grateful. As they walked through LAX, Ebony spotted her suitcase already on the carousel, priority tagged. She thanked Linda once more and stepped into the California sun. Her phone buzzed with texts, friends reacting to her brief social media update. The story of Flight 319 was already making waves. What happened wouldn't stay in the sky. The ripples had just begun, and Ebony Carter stood at their center. The next morning, Ebony awoke in her grandmother's cozy Los Angeles bungalow. Though she tried to sleep, messages kept pinging her phone throughout the night. Word of Captain Davis's actions had spread fast. More flight attendants were stepping forward with similar stories. Her father had flown in early and headed straight to Sky One's offices. Ebony stayed back, trying to enjoy blueberry pancakes her grandmother insisted on making. Then a text lit up her phone. "All done here. Davis is officially suspended. Disciplinary process underway. Might be permanent. Call me." Relief washed over her. She stepped onto the sunny patio and called her father. "Ebony," he answered instantly. "Hey, Dad. So it's happening?" "Yes." "The crew backed you up. Passenger complaints helped too. HR pulled prior misconduct reports. Termination is likely." She let out a slow breath. "He can't keep doing that to people." Her father's voice softened. "You handled it with grace." Linda Coleman was impressed. "I'm proud of you." "Thanks, Dad. I just wish it never happened." "I know. But now the airline has to act. This isn't just about you, it's bigger." Then came another request. PR wants to issue a public statement about what happened. "They'd like to mention your connection to the company only with your permission." Ebony hesitated. She was just 17. But if this helped others avoid what she'd faced, tell them they can. "I want people to know even the owner's daughter isn't immune." Her father nodded. "I'll have them draft something." They ended the call, and Ebony returned to the kitchen, her grandmother eyeing her gently. "All right now?" Ebony smiled. "Yeah, Grandma, everything's going to be okay." A week later, Ebony was back in Atlanta for a press conference with her father. Cameras flashed as William Carter took the podium. "Today, I address a serious violation that occurred on Flight 309. A black teenage passenger, my daughter, was publicly humiliated by a veteran captain. That captain is now suspended pending termination. Discrimination has no place at Sky One." Then Ebony stepped forward. "Yes, I'm that passenger. I'm sharing this because prejudice doesn't care about your name or privilege. What happened to me happens to others too, and it has to stop." Applause filled the room. Miles away, Ryan Davis likely watched in bitter silence, his career in ruins, not because of a misunderstanding, but because of a mindset he refused to change. Ebony had stood her ground, and justice had landed. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey where a single act of prejudice ignited a powerful stand for respect and equality. If Ebony's story resonated with you, remember that we can all be the change, whether by speaking up against injustice or by offering support to those who face it. Every voice matters, no matter your age, background, or status. We hope her courage inspires you to confront bias whenever and wherever it appears. Now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you have handled things differently if you were in Ebony's shoes? Share your insights in the comments below. And if you found value in this story, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll continue to shine a light on stories that challenge us to think, feel, and stand up for what's right.